Please welcome Deborah Lewow. Deborah, come on in. Appreciate your coming. So Deborah's from outside of Atlanta, right?
Right, a suburb called Lawrenceville.
You must have spent some time in New York and L.A., though.
I did. I had offices both in New York and L.A., but I was able to convince the record companies to let me come up for 1 week a month and still continue to live in Atlanta.
Because nowadays you can communicate from any place.
From anywhere.
Well,
anywhere.
so we were talking just briefly beforehand about the way marketing and promotion was handled in the music industry up until recently. Maybe you could talk about that for a second. Like, for example, when you were working at GRP or at Warner Brothers and you had a marketing plan for a new release, what did that involve and how would the budget be handled? How much would it be budgeted for and how would you spend that money? A lot of questions at one time.
Ooh, big question. Of course, it all depends on the artist and what approach we were going to take. The one thing that's so wonderful about the record business that separates it from every other business, we're not marketing cans of tuna. We have a different product every time we come out with something. You may have an artist that has a history or a background that you can fall back on and what worked in the past and how to work forward from that. But when you're coming up with a brand new artist, it's all changed dramatically. As I was telling you before, when I first started for ABC Records in 1973, there was no internet. There was no MySpace. There was no XM. There was no Sirius. So it's strictly you budgeted your money for radio promotion, for print advertising, for what they used to call price and positioning in retail. So a large chunk of the budget would go to that. Artist development sort of became the catchphrase for where you were going to put your payola dollars, which, as I said, thanks to Governor Spitzer of New York now, I don't think that we're going to have as much graft and corruption or as much opportunity for it. I think now where most of the smart money is going to is finding where the consumer has gone. And unfortunately, in the music business, we made a big mistake and ignored the internet and thought that, oh, well, it's not going to interfere with my business, and the whole prospect of downloading has totally changed the way that we do business. And even now, the legalities. I have an artist that we wanted to launch in a different fashion by doing a free download with all the smooth jazz stations across the country. And the legalities involved with, who gets the publishing dollars and who's going to make their nickel 98 has changed everything. And that's part of the problem why the record companies are in such a bad way right this minute. And I probably didn't answer your question at all in terms of like how much money you would spend, a percentage to spend. Right now, the largest, if I was doing a marketing plan for an artist, I would want to put the largest amount of money in internet technologies.
In the sense of downloads? Or?
More in the sense of, I was on a panel at R&R because I'm on a MySpace jihad, is what they mentioned in R&R, and I really am. I started a MySpace site for my son's band, and I've seen how it has grown fans and has exposed them to people all over the world. I have my own MySpace site. I recommend all of the artists, that I work with to develop a MySpace site because what was 130 million people on there this morning. So I would put money into developing those types of opportunities. Where did your consumer go? If you're especially my situation is I work with adult-based music, so I don't have the opportunities that you do when you have a Britney Spears or a Justin Timberlake. I mean, it's harder to get an adult to go into a record store to buy something. So there's a little bit more. You have to give them really a real strong reason to go in and part with their $20. But with Amazon, it's so easy to order it. So you have to, if the consumers are going there, you have to spend your money there and to get them there.
Well, it's an independent consultant, I suppose. You have your own company, and record companies hire you to promote their new releases. So do you write the marketing plan, or are you just a component of a marketing plan?
In my present situation, again, it all depends on what the artist or label hires me for. I do have artists that are their own record company. You know, they produce the record, they've manufactured the record, they're selling it online, they're selling it through consignment in local stores. So that's a different kind of approach for them. I have companies, I do exclusive promotion for Peak Records, which took a lot of the artists from GRP. We have the Rippingtons, we have David Benoit, Eric Marienthal, Gerald Albright. For Peak Records, I do write their marketing plan. But it's a collaborative effort with their sales department and with their internet technology people. We all have input. If it's a solo artist that has hired me to do everything, I do the whole thing for them. But for Peak, I just do the radio promotion and marketing.
So you're hired by Peak to do that for all of their artists?
Yes.
So what kind of budgets do they assign to that undertaking?
It depends on the artist. Everything always goes back to the artist, and a lot of record companies look at what the past sales were. If your past sales were at a certain level, they will spend X amount of money. If you have no history at all, then it's a roll of the dice of how much they will spend for you. An average marketing budget, let's say for the Rippingtons, which is the premier artist on Peak because the owner of Peak manages the Rippingtons, and Russ Freeman, who's in the Rippingtons, is part of the owner of the label. They get a significant marketing budget. I would say, I think on this last record, because it was a 20th anniversary with a DVD, they spent probably about $300,000 in international, because they're bigger over in Japan and Europe. And that's the whole budget. That's the whole thing to do the DVD and everything else.
Oh, so that's the production
That's not just, that's the production, that's everything. To break it down strictly to marketing, I think it would probably be about maybe as much as a third of that.
So $100,000 for a marketing budget for and I have that record, and that's a pretty extensive package. I mean, it's an anniversary project, right? Mm-hmm. So how do you break that down? What percentage of that would you spend on print and on radio and on internet? It's still the internet, right?
It's still the internet, yeah. It's hard for me to actually break that into a figure for you. With the Rippingtons, and I'll just use them as an example, we don't spend as much money on the radio side of things with smooth jazz because they have a certain cachet. They can go, they're the Rippingtons, this is 20 years, so you don't have to spend money to make people aware of who they are.
You just have to mail the product to the radio station.
You have to mail it, you have to, where we spend a lot of money is in doing the win it before you can buy it. So we do a lot of product giveaways, bringing people to shows. A lot of artist development marketing money is bringing the Rippingtons to do a show here for Loyola, and we cover their talent fee and you cover their travel expenses type of thing. So those type of budgets all, but I don't, again, in my situation as a subcontractor, I don't have the final authority on the budget. That's just something that I put my recommendations in.
And budgets changed, I guess, depending on how well the record's selling, or
exactly.
It's moving up, they'll spend more money.
Well, you have a weekly marketing meeting, and in the marketing meeting they discuss, what the sales were the previous week and where our hot spots are, and, where it makes more sense to spend more money. Obviously, in the major markets for jazz, it makes more sense to spend money. Very little money is spent on print anymore. And a lot of the retailers, of course, Tower Records is going out of business, and their charges for price and positioning. An example, a project that I worked last Christmas for Marilyn Scott. Borders did a program over the Christmas holidays, and they charged Prana Records $75,000 for a month's worth of price and positioning at Borders for Marilyn Scott, but then they only ordered 600 pieces of product.
Great.
So, and they're because of their inventory control, you know, they put 2 in a store, and if you sell the 2, then they'll replace the 2, but they won't put deep product in the store anymore. So that's something that the record companies are having to deal with, is how much it costs per unit, how much you spend to sell one piece of product.
600 to 75,000. That doesn't come out.
No, it doesn't, and that's why the record companies are scrambling.
Well, if you're going to put your money then on the internet, what kind of things do you buy on the internet? How do you market it on the internet?
Well, again, MySpace is free. So that type of situation, building your own site, you had said a lot of people in here were entrepreneurs, and I noticed the gentleman that picked me up today, you have a MySpace site as well. You have a music site or a personal site? Music site. And that's free for you to set up yourself. Record companies are in their IT division are hiring people to basically go in there and mine for friends. But it's not like you buy advertising on there. Where you would buy advertising is you might buy a banner on a radio station. Where I spend a lot of my dollars is all of my smooth jazz radio stations have either a weekly, bi-weekly, or a monthly e-blast that they send out to people who sign up to be a loyal listener. I'm sure you guys have probably, you read the book Tipping Point, or, okay. There's something very interesting. When you go and sign up at a radio station and say you want to be a loyal listener, you give them permission to market to you. So the smart radio stations now are taking those newsletters and they're selling those banners and they're selling opportunities to record companies. The initiative I was talking about for Paul Brown, we were going to buy into the e-blasts for all the radio stations to for an awareness factor. In New York, to be a standalone e-blast to the 100,000 people that are in their database is $2,500. In Chicago, it's $3,000, but you also get to have, I think it's 148 spins on their stream, not on their broadcast, because in the streaming technology, they can't have the same advertising running on the same thing, so they're those 3-minute blocks. Well, now you can buy into that block as like an infomercial, and so we are spending a lot of money doing those types of things.
What if you were an independent artist and you really didn't have a lot of money to spend? How would you market yourself on the internet?
Well, again, I go to MySpace. Again, I'm on that jihad, and there's 120 million people on there, and initially it was kids trying to hook up, and now it's like one of the best MySpace sites that I've seen is Bob James. And he does it himself. He maintains it himself. He's in there every day, but he has a really comprehensive site. He's grabbed onto the technology, and he has lots and lots of friends and fans, and many, many people come up to him at shows and say, well, I found you on MySpace. You know, I'm very excited about that. So I think that that would be where I would go. There are several internet radio stations that are quite viable, and you can buy into their database as well. In smooth jazz, there is an internet station called smoothjazz.com, and they have a chart. They have a listening loft you can buy into. They have all kind of different unique opportunities to get into, and they have, I think they're quoting like 100,000 unique visitors a month to smoothjazz.com. So, and their program, you can buy a month platform program with them for $500, which to get out to that many people, unique visitors, you know, for your banner on the site there, I think it's well worth the $500 to do it. So I recommend it to all the smaller artists that I work with.
Do you take independent bands, independent clients? So do you advise them on you listen to their music and then you advise them on how to market it and sell it? Well, where do they sell it? Where would they sell it? Either
on their own website. There's opportunities for consignment. You can CD Baby. You can register with CD Baby, CD Now, Amazon.com. You can.
So you would stay out of the retail stores because you couldn't get into them anyway, right?
Well, with retail stores, it's extremely difficult to get in. It's that whole price and positioning place. They're taking less and less inventory. If you're an unknown artist, unless you have a big buzz going about you in town, it's very hard to get a major chain to take you in at all. So you have to go to like a mom and pop, and how many of those are left?
That's true, too. What you want to define price and position?
Price and positioning. It's the it's the retail store way of taking all the record companies' money for nothing.
Well, it's...
What you do is you pay for a program that gives you your record on sale and placement up on that front wall or that front part of the bin outside of the regular rack to where your record gets special attention for a certain period of time. And it's very expensive. It's some of these stores charge quite a pretty penny, and if you're trying to, say, put a, oh gosh, what's the new record that just came out today? The new Incubus came out today. I would love to look at that marketing plan to see what they spent to launch that record today. Anybody go out and buy Incubus today? Anybody like Incubus?
What do you figure they spent?
Conservatively, probably about, oh God. Oh, I can't even make an educated guess anymore because I haven't, I would think probably about $250,000.
So a large number.
A large number, yeah.
So the major companies still exist because they can do that. They can lay out that $250,000 and not blink.
Well, but they wouldn't do it for Joe Banana and the Peels.
No.
They would only do it on an artist that they were expecting that was going to sell platinum or gold or better, you know.
Yeah, and the same thing is true with radio. You mentioned internet radio. Do you advise your clients on how to market their records on the radio, the terrestrial radio stations? Well, that costs money as well, right? I mean,
well, if you're buying, basically what I do is I try to get my clients airplay, which we don't pay for. And then above and beyond that, what you try to do once you get on the air, that's just the beginning, because then you have to make yourself stand out from the rest. So are you going to do a listener event? Are you going to do a win it before you can buy it? Are you going to give away CDs? Are you going to bring the artist in for, we call it a drink and flea, but they're meet and greets. But those
Drink
type
and
of,
flea?
a drink and
I like
flea. The artists used to call them a drink and flea kind of thing.
so so then you would spend your radio budget on those kind of things after you're going to spend some money just getting the records out to the radio station.
Right.
You're obviously not going to pay for radio play because that would be illegal.
Right.
And,
if Mr. Spitzer is listening.
Yeah, well, I think he probably isn't, but
Yes.
he did take on all those major companies and made a difference. So I'm trying to get at I guess the need, the utility of terrestrial radio. It doesn't play the same role as it used to, right?
It's funny that you should mention that because I pulled an article off the Forbes magazine, Forbes.com, and there was also another article in the Wall Street Journal about there's a movie out now called The Day the Music Died,
Right.
and they're not doing like a full national release. They're showing it on college campuses
Right.
and in coffee houses and hip house parties and stuff. And it's two guys who went around the country interviewing people about how the dismal state of the record industry and why we are in the state that we're in. And I forgot your question.
Well,
Sorry.
the major companies and radio play is radio still a factor in marketing records?
It still is our primary window. It's the primary window to get to the largest amount of people. However, with deregulation and Clear Channel, buying all the stations and everything becoming so researched and homogenized and the playlists getting tighter and tighter and tighter, you have people that turn on the radio, but they can't tell you what they've heard or even what the jock's name is or what the dial position is. It's just background noise to them. And the people who are really musically passionate are going elsewhere. They're going to XM, they're going to satellite, they're going to the internet because terrestrial radio is pretty homogenized and boring.
So you don't really advise your clients to make much use of terrestrial radio, even though it's still the prime mover of product in this country?
Oh, I would advise them to you want to open every window to a potential consumer that you can. And my first line of attack is with radio because if you can get that elusive radio airplay, then you have a foot in the door and a story to tell, but it can't be your only way to get the word out there anymore, or you will unfortunately get caught behind, well, we can't add your record because we had to add the new Incubus. You know, it's very hard for a new artist to get started on terrestrial radio.
And you must have your list of smooth jazz stations, pop stations, rap stations, all the rest, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, and sometimes stations aren't just one thing or another. They have various programs. Do you have a way of judging that station for whether or not, if they have an hour show every Friday night for the blues, do you send them all your blues records?
Well, yes. And the reason for that is in markets where you have that 1 hour of blues show, you have usually a pretty loyal listening audience that are going to be your primary consumer. So yeah, even if it's only an hour show, I found that there are a lot of the non-commercial stations with those couple hour shows that can sell more. Perfect example, in Atlanta, we have WCLK, which is Clark University, and they play jazz and smooth jazz. And we have a commercial radio station, WJZZ. And WJZZ can bang a record. You know, 24 to 28 spins per week is considered heavy at smooth jazz, which is, you know, four plays per day. Clark College can play something significantly less amount of time, but their listenership is a more passionate consumer. The people who are listening to the smooth jazz commercial station seem to be much more passive about it, whereas the people who are listening to Clark are the people who are actually going to go out and buy a Boney James.
Well, do you monitor the success of your programs through SoundScan? Do you check to see if the show's on that night, what sold the next day?
Well, sometimes it's not as immediate as that, and you know, you can pull up sales figures almost instantaneously now with SoundScan, and you can see bumps in markets. Specifically, if you have an artist go through the market, you can usually see a peak in the sales. We have two separate things that I monitor. I get a weekly thing from Radio and Records, which is media-based, which tells me how many spins my particular projects got on each radio station. So I can actually see that QCD in New York played Lee Ritenour 14 times, roughly 2 times per day. And then I can go and look at the New York sales and see if that's impacting it at all. If they added the record 3 weeks ago and we didn't have any sales, and then all of a sudden we had a little spike, then you say, okay, QCD is selling records for us. So if they're selling records for us, well then maybe we ought to do a giveaway. Maybe we ought to do something special with Lee Ritenour. Maybe we ought to put a download in their e-blast, you know, type of thing to get more of the word out there.
Is a tour a key component of a marketing plan?
Yes. Live performance specific, and again, I've worked the last 20 years in jazz and smooth jazz, so although I do have other areas, that's kind of my specialty. The live performance has a significant effect on sales. So if you're an artist or a band and you are just going to sit in your garage and make music and send it out and never plan to get in front of people, I don't hold much hope for you.
So touring is essential.
I think touring is essential.
Now, do you try to schedule your marketing plan to be implemented at the same time the tour starts?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, you'll find that most of the major artists, I mean, everybody has a certain time frame in the calendar year where they want to try to put out a record, but you'll find that most of the major ones are going to come out in January, February, so that they can tour April, May, June, July through the summer months.
Have you seen any kind of marketing plan or aspects of a marketing plan that was so unique and different that they just drew your attention? You said, wow, what a great idea. Anything like that happened to you recently?
Give me a minute to think on that. I think the last time that I saw something that was really significant in terms of the whole way that they approached the record from, of course they had almost 20 years to plan it, but it was Steely Dan's 2 Against Nature. They hadn't had a record out in 20 years, and they had gone back into the studio to record, and Warner Brothers really pulled out all the stops to cover all the bases. And when you start talking about wanting to have the cover of Rolling Stone and Spin and all these different magazines, you're talking about magazines sometimes that have a year lead time. So you have to start your plan way ahead of time. And I think the most extensive plan that I saw was on that particular record.
So your marketing plans, when you develop it, it is before the release, obviously.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, they can't come to you after a record has been released, because after a few months it's a dead issue, right?
Well, yeah, it does have that flop stink after about 12 weeks. If you come out with a record and nothing's happening in 12 weeks, it's basically over.
Yeah. So how far in advance are you planning your marketing plan from the release of the record?
Well, I just am working on this Paul Brown marketing concept right now, and his record is due to drop March 28th of '07. So what is that, about 6 months ahead?
Do you always market the artist or the music?
When I was at Warner Brothers, we had a mission to establish a brand of Warner Jazz, as well as the artist in their own right. Who did it best was GRP. And I was with GRP before I went to Warner Brothers, and they had even instituted at retail a June is GRP month, where every year major retailers all across the country had big displays of all the GRP artists, and we created special samplers for the stores and those types of things. GRP has a brand to it, and people who like smooth jazz, like if I say GRP, people resonate to it, and they know Dave Grusin and Larry Rosen. That I think, when I went to Warner Brothers, the gentleman that I went to work for there, Ricky Schultz, and then later Matt Pearson, they both wanted to have that same kind of cachet that GRP had, and they wanted to separate it out from being Warner Brothers to being Warner Brothers Jazz.
Interesting, because Warner Brothers was already such a big name.
Right.
But a few labels have definitely created brands for themselves.
Wyndham Hill.
Yeah, CTI, certainly GRP. But the major companies never did that. You didn't buy a record because it was on BMG or Sony or Columbia or anything like that. And they did. I don't think they tried to do that. So they were selling artists.
Right.
Then you get the idea of branding the label, and really it's the label. I bought everything on CTI. I didn't care what it was. But what about
Some
that
great
now?
records, huh?
But now it's really artist driven, isn't it?
Yes, yes, it is, and it's a very, especially on the pop side of things, it's immediate gratification, that quick fix. You got to have that hit. You got to, on the A&R side of things. My son is in a band, and they've been submitting demos to different labels, and the A&R people used to be, oh yeah, I think that's a hit. Now it's like they want to hear 4 hits before they're going to invest their money in you. They want to hear 4 strong radio tunes before they're going to be willing to invest that $250,000 in you.
But you got to keep that record alive, right? So if you can keep releasing singles for the radio over a period of 6 months, then you've got a longer life.
Right.
Well, can you point to any example recently where your marketing plan has been it worked like a charm? It just like, well, that fit like a glove. It definitely did the job. Does this happen to you every day, or is this?
No, I wish it did happen every day.
What does it take to do that? How does that work? Is that just luck?
Well,
I mean, you set it up and you've thought it through, and you know where the market is, and you've got to go get that market, right? It's driving people to the product. That's what you're doing. So, you mean, you figured it out. Then you just start it in motion and
try to push it on through. Well, again, the hardest part is getting that open window, and then once you have that open window, you have to figure out all the ways to capitalize on it. It's not just enough to get the ad. You have to go back and try to grow that into more spins, into opportunities for the artist to come into the market. You have to continue that. I mean, back with the concept of a marketing plan that worked like a charm, one of the more successful artists with Warner Jazz was Boney James, and one of the best collaborative efforts was the Boney James-Rick Braun record, and their whole rollout as 2 kind of titans coming together worked very well for us in terms of being able to, you had 2 artists who could both sell tickets at shows, and you put them together. And then, I don't know, right after that we started having the guitars and saxes tours where people, instead of just sending a solo artist out, it's not enough just to go see Gerald Albright. You've got to see Gerald Albright with Norman Brown and Will Downing now, because people are wanting more for their money.
Well, a lot of the music that's made these days is made by independent bands, bands who are not going to be in that top percent that make it to the major labels. And they've got to find a way to make themselves stick out from the crowd, right? There's so many. How do they do that?
Well, it's interesting. A couple of the artists from Warner Brothers, Rick Braun and Richard Elliott, started their own label called Artisan with their manager and a lawyer. And initially, they were not going to go into brick and mortar stores. They were only going to be available on the internet. And they wanted to try to market it that way, to where you had to come to their website or their MySpace site or one of their shows in order to buy the product. And I think that that's a good model. And I think that more and more artists are going to start taking, you can record the product in your home with the Pro Tools. You can manufacture up the CDs relatively easy. Most of people in here taking a computer class can generate a CD cover. And it's just a matter of putting it up and marketing it and seeing how many people you can get to buy it. I mean, you can all do it self-contained. I really think that the role of the record company is now more like a bank. Like, you go to them, they advance you the money to do the things. And they have the personnel to advise you how to do it properly. But I think taking control of your own destiny is the way to go. I would advise everybody in here to, if you have that opportunity. I mean, a lot of people are waiting for the label to come down and hand you that magic check, and then you're going to be a rock star. It just doesn't happen that way anymore, and it's more and more you have to take responsibility, and you really have to be a little bit smarter than the people that you're entrusting your careers to.
Do you have to have a story? The artist has to have a story that separates themselves from them, from everybody else?
Yeah.
And then you got to market and tell that story.
Right.
And that's your job.
That's my job.
So when you handed an artist or a product to sell, do you try to investigate that? What is the story here? What can we sell this? How can we sell this?
Sure. Oh yeah, sure. We at Warner Brothers, when we signed Joshua Redman, the whole story behind him was he had won the Monk Award. So that was the story we started with. That he had won the Thelonious Monk competition. So there has to be a little nugget, something to talk about that makes them, just a little bit specialer than the next.
How much of a role does your personal relationships that you have with press and radio and other people in the industry, how much of a role does that play?
Relationships are everything. Relationships really are. I mean, it's a matter of getting the right person on the phone and getting to yes. So it's cold calling is very hard. I am really fortunate. I've been doing this for over 30 years, and I have a lot of friends who have migrated into positions of authority, and it's much easier to pick up the phone and call Russ Davis at XM and say, I need a favor, I need you to world premiere this record for me, than it would be for me to call up, hi, I'm Deborah Lewow, and I'm working for Peak Records, and type of thing. So yeah, the relationships really do mean everything.
And you're not going to use those relationships inappropriately, right? I mean, if you take them something that's not really worth their time, they're not going to like it when you call them again.
Oh, no, credibility is everything, and you can't... I've always been really careful with people to say, do you like it? And if I like it, sure, yeah, I'll tell you I like it. If I don't like it, I can tell you about all the people that do.
Huh.
It's a matter of kind of changing it around. But... yeah, I think credibility and relationships are really key in what I do in trying to massage the artist along. And some of the smartest artists are the ones who also develop those relationships as well. I worked with a saxophone player at Warner Brothers named Huge Groove, and his first #1 single was called Slam Dunk. And he went and had these little basketball trophies made with thanks very much, Huge Groove, for all of the radio stations, and personalized with the program directors' names. And he did this at his own expense. And consequently, every time a new Huge Groove record comes in, they open it up and listen to it right away because he did something personal to touch them, to thank them for what they had done for him. So yeah, smart artists are the ones that Kenny G has great relationships with the program directors and consultants, and in fact Kenny G just signed on to be one of the guest disc jockeys on the Smooth Jazz Network. So he's going to be a DJ.
Well, that's good for
because he needs the money, right?
Suppose somebody wanted to do what you do. How would they go about doing that? How do they break into that business?
Wow. The one thing that's going in all of y'all's favor is it is a very youth-oriented business, and they're looking for people who are willing to work for not a whole lot of money to start. But, I mean, when you're first starting out, you can do that. I lucked into my job. I can't say that I had any kind of training for it. I wish I would have, but I was an executive secretary, and I had a boyfriend who was in a band, and I had an opportunity through a friend to go to work for ABC Records on their order desk, and in my naive little 19-year-old mind, I thought, well, if I work for a record company, I can help my boyfriend get a deal. To the point where I took a job for significantly less money and ended up having to work as a night manager at the Gap so that I could pay my bills. And I never did get my boyfriend that deal. But 30 years later, you know, I was able to parlay it into a good career. But it was just a friend. It was a friend kind of situation. The same way people get jobs at radio stations. You go and hang out with the jocks and you befriend them. If you know anybody that works at a record company, if you know anybody that works at a record store, those types of intros into it. Promotion now is very different from when I got started. When I started in promotion in 1973, there were very few women. In fact, I think I was the first woman to ever call on WQXI in Atlanta in person. There was another woman doing promotion out of New York that had called them on the phone, but I think it was the first one to ever walk in there. And now if you look at most of the major labels, a large significant of their VPs of promotion are women. So that whole landscape has kind of changed. But I was a radioactive. I mean, I was always very much into music and very, you know, knew all the songs on the radio, turned them up. So I had a love and a passion for it. So if you love something, you find out how to get paid for it, and then you never work.
That sounds good. Well, let's see now. What about these? You do a lot of events. You go to conventions and conferences and stuff. What role would that play in the future of these people who want to go in the music industry?
Well, if you're... what's happening now, there used to be a lot more annual conventions. Radio and Records had an annual convention. Billboard had conventions. Gavin had conventions. A lot of the trade publications have gone away. There is no more Gavin. R&R just had a convention in Dallas, which is where I met Ann Gabriel. They were just bought out by Billboard, so now their two conventions will probably meld together. I think that will be less and less. The one thing that I would recommend to a lot of artists now is to try to get into these things like they have in Austin, the South by Southwest, and go and showcase for people, go and showcase for the press and for radio consultants, and get an opportunity where you've got all those people in the market there to play for. Those are the type of things I would recommend to artists. For people getting into the music industry, the conventions, they used to be a big excuse to get together and party, and now it's like we all get together and get in these rooms and say, "Oh my God, how are we going to save ourselves?" You know, kind of thing.
That's not a networking opportunity anymore, huh?
No, not as much as it used to be. Not as much. The record companies, as you know, everybody's buying each other now. There's something on the ticker this morning about their EMI is back up on the block trying to buy somebody. So the opportunities are less and less to get a job. Most of the companies now, New York, LA, and Nashville. So there's not it used to be a big branch distribution system for Atlanta. Now they're just sales offices there. Same thing in Dallas. Same thing in Chicago. So you don't have that many local opportunities that you used to.
So that old business that you and I grew up in is going away. It's pretty much gone by now, right?
Yes.
So, and what's replacing it? Do you see any trends in that you could maybe point to that would be give you a reason for optimism?
A reason for optimism. Well, one thing I know for sure, the music isn't going away and the fans aren't going to go away. It's, in the land of the deaf, the one-eared man is king. So if you figure out how to reach the consumer, the sky's the limit. If you have something unique and compelling that people are going to want, it's just trying to find the opportunity to get in front of them that's more difficult than it had been before.
So we're dealing much more in niche markets at this point. So then the idea is to be able to drive people, find the people that would be interested in, who are the people in that market? Who are the people that care about that music?
Right.
And so that's your job. That's going to be the job of any artist or any publicist or any promotion person, is to target that particular market. Any final words about that, about how you go about that? I mean, smooth jazz, we know. There's a smooth jazz radio network kind of system of people. There is a market for that music. And you know how to get to that market.
Well, we're trying to make sure that we know how to get there. It's like who moved the cheese. You want to try to get there before the rats do and be waiting with the cheese for them to have, as opposed to running around going, oh my God, where did the cheese go? So, yeah, that would be pretty much it.
You have a lot of, your business is evolving every day, right?
I actually told somebody about a week ago that I have had to rewrite my mission statement 4 times this year.
What is it now?
What is it now? Oh my gosh, I strive to get my artist or label or project exposure in any way possible that is legal.
Legal is good. Okay, that's good. That covers a lot of bases.
Okay.
Have y'all conducted any statistical tests as to which percentage of your market uses the internet to find your artists? Because, I mean, you keep saying about how MySpace has 120 million users. Well, like, what percentage of that is actually seeking out jazz that you're offering?
I really don't know the answer to that question. I don't know what percentage is seeking it out in that way. I do know that, Bob James right now probably has about between 5,000 and 6,000 friends, whereas Incubus has about 500,000 friends. So maybe 10% to the jazz side.
Which facets of the internet do you find are like most useful for promoting your artists? Because I think it keeps reinstated throughout a lot of things that people aren't seeking out as many just like records from stores. All the stores are closing. That's obviously on its way out. What do you think is like the best way that you'll end up taking advantage of that in the future?
Well, once the legal beagles figure it all out on who's going to get paid for what, I think you're going to be buying most of your music and probably most of your entertainment through the internet, if not downloading it onto something on your watch that you can listen to and watch. I think it's all going that way, and I try to get there first. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anybody else?
Hello. You were talking about MySpace and how prevalent it is in the music business, or in the music industry. Some people might disagree with you and say that MySpace is just another fad that's going out of style, just like every other business on the internet. What would you say to this, and what would you say is on the horizon for the next big thing?
Well, it depends on your age group. I understand now that in the people who originally started out with MySpace were the 14, 15, 16-year-olds looking to hook up, and now that's taken over by Facebook, I believe. The next big thing, wow. I'm still pretty much on this MySpace jihad, so it's kind of hard for me to get off that, and only because I've seen so much success with artists that I've worked with and also with my son's band, just in terms of growing a sense of community. The next big thing, I don't know. If I knew that, I would be queen. You know,
It will probably have something to do with the internet.
oh, there's no question. It's all kind of climbing that way. I did read something where, in fact, in this week's Radio and Records, you can buy it on the newsstand in New York and LA. I don't know if you can get it here, but you might be able to go to radioandrecords.com online. But they have an article on MySpace. And actually, Universal is suing MySpace because of copyright infringements for their videos. So that you're going to see, again, it's the legal beagles figuring out who's going to make this legal, who's going to get paid, the royalties, who's going to get paid. And once they figure that out, the whole thing will open up. The other part with the record companies, and the reason that change has been so slow there, is you had people who were in the upper demos or in the upper echelon of the company who had been doing things the old way for so long that they sort of ignored the evolution. And so now I think that most of the major labels have either retired out or gotten rid of most of the people who are in what I call the good old days mindset. And now most of the people are looking to move it forward, and it is going to be online or on your watch or on your iPod or on your, what's the new one, Zuni? Is that a new? Zune. Is that what it is? All of these little different ways you can carry your music and your videos and everything with you is totally different from going to, I walked across the street to Thrifty Drugs with my $3 and bought Meet the Beatles on mono and thought it was, you know, a big thing from Thrifty Drugstore. So
Now you can get YouTube on your cell phone.
yes.
That's cool.
You said you liked MySpace so much. What is it about it? Not saying that like MySpace isn't on its way out or anything, but what about MySpace? What is it about it that benefits a band so much? Like, what are the certain qualities that a band can take away from it that, you know, why you use it so much, I guess?
Okay, I'm assuming you have a band, right? And you put your site up on MySpace, and you can put, was it 3 or 4 songs up there? Then you start to farm into the community. It's viral marketing. You ask your friends to come to MySpace, and then you send out bulletins, and those bulletins, they ask their friends to come to your space. On my son's band's MySpace, which is myspace.com/LazyEyeAtlanta, we've sold ringtones, T-shirts, CDs, downloads, you know, everything that you can create a community of fans. Touring, let's say you have a touring situation, you put your tour schedule up there, you solicit for people in individual, hey, everybody in Charlotte, we're going to be in Charlotte next weekend, those type of, and tell all your friends, all you people in Charlotte, send a bulletin out to your friends and tell them so that you can create a bigger, you know, viral environment for the band.
Right. So community.
Community. It is a community. And, you know, everybody wants to feel like they've discovered something. And I think that's one of the cool things about MySpace as well. This band, Arctic Monkeys, I think Arctic Monkeys had sold 300,000 units before they had even gotten a record deal. And it was totally through MySpace in the UK.
They sold 300,000 CDs?
CDs.
Through MySpace?
No, through stores and on their website and at gigs. But they had, before they were released here in the States, they had sold 300,000 records.
That's pretty impressive. Huh?
It is.
Anybody else?
I think you'd look good on the dance floor.
Well, let's give a big hand to Deborah. Thank you very much, Deborah. Appreciate it. Thank you very much.